A father returned to the home he built with his late wife, only to hear his own son shout, "That room is my wife's." What looked like a shocking family betrayal soon uncovered a carefully planned fraud that reached far beyond one house. Stay until the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more unforgettable true-style drama stories. I am Thomas Brenzel, and for most of my life, I believed a house was more than walls and a roof. It was where memories stayed long after the people who created them were gone. My wife and I bought our home nearly 30 years earlier after saving every extra dollar we could. We raised our only son there, celebrated birthdays, survived arguments, and faced losses together. For years after my wife passed away, the house became quiet, but it still felt like the only place where I truly belonged. 3 weeks before everything changed, I underwent knee surgery. The recovery was slower than my doctor expected, and my younger sister insisted I spend a few weeks at her ranch in Montana so she could help me during rehabilitation. I resisted at first because I hated leaving my home unattended, but my son, Kalen Brenzel, quickly volunteered to take care of everything. "Don't worry, Dad," he had told me while loading my suitcase into his truck. "I'll water the plants, collect the mail, and make sure nothing happens." His confidence reassured me. I thanked him, handed over the spare keys, and left believing I had made the responsible decision. The weeks passed quietly. My sister kept me busy with physical therapy exercises and short walks around her property. Every few days I called Kalen to ask how things were going. "The house is fine," he always answered. "Focus on getting better." Nothing in his voice suggested there was any reason to worry. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, my doctor cleared me to return home several days earlier than planned. I decided not to tell Kalen. I thought it would be nice to surprise him and thank him in person for looking after the place. The drive home took nearly 6 hours. Gray clouds followed me across the highway, and light rain covered the windshield for most of the trip. By the time I turned onto my street, evening was beginning to settle in. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered. Children were riding bicycles. Sprinklers watered green lawns. A delivery truck rolled slowly past the corner. Everything felt familiar until I parked in front of my own house. At first, I noticed something small. The flower pots my late wife had arranged beside the front porch were gone. In their place stood modern concrete planters I had never seen before. I frowned, telling myself perhaps Kalen wanted to freshen up the entrance. Then I reached for my key. It didn't fit. I pulled it out, checked it carefully, and tried again. Nothing. The lock had been replaced. A strange feeling settled in my chest. I walked around to the garage where I had hidden an emergency key years earlier inside a weatherproof lockbox. Thankfully, that key still opened the side entrance leading into the laundry room. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. The scent of my home had disappeared. Instead of the familiar smell of old wood and fresh coffee, expensive perfume and scented candles filled the air. Someone had repainted the walls. The hallway furniture had changed. Even more unsettling, every framed photograph that once showed my wife, my son, and me had vanished. Blank spaces remained where they had hung for years. I slowly climbed the staircase, gripping the handrail as my repaired knee protested with every step. Halfway up, I heard laughter. A woman's laughter. Then I heard my son's voice. Neither of them sounded surprised or worried. They sounded comfortable, as if they belonged there. I followed the voices toward the master bedroom. The bedroom that had always belonged to my wife and me. The door was slightly open. I pushed it wider. Before I could take another step, Kalen rushed across the room and blocked the doorway with both arms stretched wide. His face lost all color. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he shouted loudly enough for the entire house to hear. "Don't go in there." I stared at him in complete disbelief. "What are you talking about? Move." Instead of moving, he planted his feet even harder. His breathing became fast. Behind him stood a young woman wearing one of my late wife's robes. She looked confused for only a moment before calmly placing a hand on Kalen's shoulder. Then my own son looked directly into my eyes and yelled words I never imagined hearing inside my own home. "That room is my wife's." For several long seconds, I simply stared at Kalen, convinced I had misunderstood what he had just said. My knee still ached from the drive home, rainwater dripped from my jacket onto the hardwood floor, and yet none of that mattered anymore. My own son stood in the doorway of the bedroom I had shared with my late wife for nearly 3 decades, acting as though I had no right to enter. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. Kalen swallowed before answering. "I said this room belongs to my wife now." Behind him, the young woman stepped forward. She appeared to be in her late 20s with dark brown hair tied into a loose ponytail. She wore my wife's cream-colored robe as if it had always been hers. For a brief moment, she looked embarrassed, but the expression disappeared almost instantly. She offered a polite smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize you were coming back today." I looked directly at her. "And you are?" "My name is Leora Vance." She extended her hand as though we were meeting at a neighborhood barbecue instead of standing in the middle of my bedroom. I ignored the gesture. She slowly lowered her arm. Kalen let out an impatient sigh. "Dad, this is my wife." I blinked. "Wife? We got married 2 months ago." I knew they had been dating. I had even congratulated him on the engagement months earlier, but they had never mentioned a wedding date. Apparently, it had happened while I was recovering in Montana. "I would have appreciated an invitation," I said. Kalen looked away. It all happened quickly. The explanation sounded rehearsed. My eyes wandered past them into the room. Almost nothing remained the way I had left it. My wife's antique dresser had been replaced with sleek modern furniture. Our family photographs had disappeared. The quilt my wife had sewn by hand no longer covered the bed. Instead, expensive decorative pillows filled the mattress. Even the curtains had changed. Every visible trace of the life my wife and I built together had been erased. Without asking permission, I stepped forward. Kalen immediately moved sideways, blocking me again. "I told you not to go inside. I don't need permission to enter my own bedroom." His jaw tightened. "It isn't your bedroom anymore." Those words hit harder than I expected. Leora suddenly spoke before the situation became even more heated. "Kalen, maybe we should explain everything." He nodded reluctantly. "Dad, things have changed. I can see that." "No," he continued. "I mean legally." That single word caught my attention. Legally. He walked toward the dresser, opened the top drawer, and removed a neatly organized folder. Without saying another word, he handed it to me. Inside were several documents. Property records. Financial statements. Legal forms. Then I saw the page sitting on top. Property transfer agreement. The document listed my home, my address, my legal description. Near the bottom was what appeared to be my signature transferring ownership to Kalen Brenzel. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of speeding up. Years of engineering had trained me to notice details before emotions. I examined the signature carefully. At first glance, it looked convincing. Very convincing. Then something immediately felt wrong. I signed thousands of blueprints throughout my career. Every contract, every permit, every inspection. My signature had remained almost identical for decades. Yet this version included a middle initial. Thomas E. Brenzel. I almost laughed. I don't have a middle name. Never had. Never would. Whoever forged the signature had copied it from an outdated passport application that mistakenly inserted an initial decades ago before the error was officially corrected. Only someone who had never watched me sign legal documents would make that mistake. I slowly closed the folder. "Interesting paperwork," I said quietly. Kalen crossed his arms. "It proves the house belongs to me now." "No," I answered while looking directly into his eyes. It proves someone worked very hard to create a fake version of reality. For the first time since I arrived, genuine fear flashed across his face. He recovered quickly, but I had already seen it. Leora looked from him to me with growing uncertainty. She wasn't smiling anymore. Then she asked the question that changed the atmosphere completely. Kalen, why does he seem so certain the documents are fake? The silence that followed Leora's question felt heavier than any argument. No one moved. Rain continued tapping against the bedroom windows while the three of us stood frozen in the room that no longer resembled the one my wife and I had built together. I watched Kalen carefully. He had always been good at hiding his emotions, but I knew his habits better than anyone. Whenever he felt cornered, he rubbed the back of his neck before speaking. His hand lifted almost instinctively, then stopped halfway as he realized I had noticed. He forced a smile that looked painfully unnatural. Because he's confused, Kalen answered before Leora could look at me again. The surgery, the medication, everything has been stressful for him. I slowly turned toward my son. Be very careful with what you're saying. He shrugged. I'm just telling the truth. No, I replied. You're creating a story. Leora's eyes shifted between us. You told me your father had already moved into assisted living, she said quietly. I never moved anywhere, I answered. You told me he wanted a smaller apartment. I signed no lease. You told me he didn't even want this house anymore. I looked directly at her. My wife died here. Every memory I have of her is inside these walls. Why would I willingly abandon this place without taking a single family photograph? Leora's expression slowly changed. Confidence gave way to uncertainty. She glanced toward the hallway where several moving boxes still sat unopened. I never thought about that. Kalen stepped between us again. Don't listen to him. But the certainty in his voice had weakened. I closed the folder containing the forged documents and handed it back to him. Keep it, I said. You'll need it. His eyebrows narrowed. What does that mean? It means I won't waste time arguing inside my own house. He folded his arms. So you're leaving? For tonight. A brief smile crossed his face. He thought he had won. He couldn't have been more mistaken. I walked downstairs without raising my voice once. Every room I passed revealed another piece of my life that had disappeared. The family room now displayed abstract artwork where photographs of vacations once hung. My office had become a nursery painted pale green. Shelves that once held engineering books now displayed decorative baskets and candles. Whoever redesigned the house hadn't simply redecorated it. They had intentionally erased every sign that I had ever lived there. When I reached the front door, I paused beside the old grandfather clock my wife had inherited from her parents. It was gone. Only a lighter rectangle remained on the hardwood floor where it had stood for decades. I closed my eyes for a moment. That clock had survived 3 generations. Now it had vanished without anyone asking my permission. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. I climbed into my truck but didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, I opened the glove compartment and removed a small notebook where I kept important contact numbers. The first call I made was not to the police. It was not to a lawyer. It was to my insurance agent. If ownership records had somehow changed, I wanted to know whether my homeowner's policy had also been altered. The answer came only 15 minutes later. Mr. Brenzel, the agent said carefully, your policy was cancelled 12 days ago. I tightened my grip on the phone. Cancelled by whom? According to our records, the new property owner requested replacement coverage through another company. That confirmed what I had already suspected. Someone wasn't merely pretending to own my house. Someone had been systematically replacing every legal record connected to it. I thanked the agent and ended the call. Then I drove directly downtown instead of checking into a hotel. The county administration building stayed open late every Thursday evening. If there was any chance of learning how those documents had been filed, I intended to find out before anyone had time to destroy evidence. Inside the nearly empty building, a security guard directed me toward the public records office. Most of the lights had already been turned off, and only one employee remained behind the front counter. She looked younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with a stack of property files spread across her desk. As I approached, she looked up politely. "Good evening. How can I help you?" "My name is Thomas Brenzel," I said. "I believe someone has stolen my house." The woman stared at me for several long seconds. Then her expression suddenly changed. She quietly stood, glanced around the empty office, lowered her voice, and asked, "Mr. Brenzel, did anyone tell you to ask for the metadata history?" Her question caught me completely off guard. "The metadata history?" I repeated. The woman gave a subtle nod before extending her hand across the counter. "My name is Noemi Halvers. I'm a title examiner assigned to property filings in this district." I introduced myself again, this time with a little more confidence. Something in her tone told me she already suspected why I had come. Noemi glanced toward the hallway leading to the supervisor's office. It was empty. "You didn't hear this from me," she said quietly. "But I remember your file." "My file?" "It came across my desk last week. I wasn't the person who approved it, but I reviewed supporting documents before they were finalized." I leaned closer. "And there were inconsistencies." "What kind?" "The digital timestamps didn't match the filing dates. Some attached documents were created only days before they supposedly existed. That should never happen." A chill ran through me. So someone altered official records. "I can't officially accuse anyone without evidence," she replied. "But if you request the metadata history through an attorney, every edit, upload, replacement, and access log can be examined." That sounded far more promising than arguing with my son inside the house. I thanked her sincerely. Before leaving, she slipped a business card across the counter. "If you decide to challenge the transfer, call me after your attorney files the preservation request." Why not before? Because once people realize someone is looking closely, electronic records have a way of disappearing. Those words stayed with me all night. The following morning, I met with attorney Malcolm Reeve, a property litigation specialist recommended by an old business colleague. After listening carefully to everything that had happened, he remained silent for several moments before closing the folder I had brought. "I've handled forged signatures before," Malcolm said. "But this..." He tapped the fake transfer agreement. "This is unusually organized." He immediately filed an emergency preservation order preventing any electronic records connected to my property from being altered or deleted until the court reviewed the dispute. Only then did I contact Noemi again. She sounded relieved. "Good," she said. "Now we can request the system logs." 2 days later, we gathered inside a conference room at the county records office. A digital forensic analyst connected a secure laptop to the archive server while Malcolm, Noemi, and I watched quietly. One by one, hidden records appeared on the screen. Upload histories, revision logs, access times, replacement files. Then the analyst stopped scrolling. "That's strange." Everyone leaned forward. "What is it?" Malcolm asked. "The transfer agreement wasn't uploaded from the county office." "Where did it come from?" The analyst enlarged the information. "A private consulting firm." Another click revealed the company name. Ashcroft Estate Transition Services. None of us recognized it. The analyst continued digging. Within minutes, more irregularities surfaced. Multiple property records from unrelated homeowners had been edited from the same outside source over the past 18 months. Different families. Different addresses. The same consulting company. Noemi slowly folded her arms. I knew your case wasn't the only one. Malcolm immediately requested copies of every relevant access log. As the files downloaded, another detail appeared. Someone from inside the county office had repeatedly approved those submissions without requesting standard identity verification. There has to be an internal accomplice, Malcolm whispered. The analyst nodded. It certainly looks that way. My situation had suddenly become much larger than a dispute between a father and his son. This was beginning to resemble an organized fraud operation. Later that afternoon, investigators from the State Financial Crimes Division contacted Malcolm's office after receiving notice of the preservation request. Once they reviewed the preliminary evidence, their attitude changed instantly. Instead of treating me as someone involved in a family disagreement, they treated me as the first confirmed victim in an expanding criminal investigation. Over the next several days, investigators quietly interviewed county employees, subpoenaed financial records, and traced communication between Ashcroft Estate Transition Services and multiple property transactions. Then came the discovery none of us expected. The consulting company had not selected victims randomly. Every targeted property belonged to homeowners over the age of 55. Most lived alone. Many had recently experienced medical issues or extended travel. Someone had been carefully identifying moments when homes became temporarily vulnerable. As investigators built their timeline, they uncovered encrypted emails exchanged between the consulting firm's owner and one of the participants. When technicians finally decrypted the messages, the sender's identity appeared on the screen. I stared at the name in complete disbelief. The emails weren't written by a stranger. They had been written by my own son, Kalen Brenzel. Seeing my son's name attached to those encrypted emails felt strangely different from hearing him lie to my face. A lie could still leave room for doubt. Digital records did not. Every message carried timestamps, sender credentials, and attachment histories. The evidence sitting on that conference room screen wasn't based on anyone's memory. It documented choices that had been made over many months. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Malcolm placed a hand on the table. Thomas, are you all right? I nodded slowly. I expected betrayal. I wasn't prepared to see how carefully he planned it. The lead investigator, Special Agent Denise Corwin, continued reviewing the recovered files. She projected several emails onto the screen. One message from Kalen read, "My father is leaving for surgery recovery next week. We'll have a clear window to finish the ownership transfer before he returns." Another replied from Ashcroft Estate Transition Services, "Replace insurance immediately after recording. Remove personal photographs to support occupancy if questions arise." Every sentence explained something I had already witnessed inside my own home. Nothing had happened by accident. The missing family pictures, the changed locks, the cancelled insurance policy, the redesigned rooms. Every detail had been part of a calculated plan. Then another document appeared. It wasn't about my house. It was a spreadsheet. The file listed dozens of names, addresses, property values, ages, and personal notes. Besides, several entries were comments such as hospital stay, living alone, extended vacation, and family caretaker has access. I felt sick. This operation had never been about me personally. I was simply one target among many. Agent Corwin immediately requested search warrants for the consulting company's office, several storage units, and my house. Because there was concern that records might be destroyed, the warrants were approved before sunrise the following morning. At exactly 6 o'clock, investigators assembled outside my neighborhood. Marked police vehicles waited around the corner while unmarked SUVs parked several houses away. Agent Corwin looked toward me. "You don't have to be here." "I do," I answered. "I need to see the truth with my own eyes." Officers approached the front door. They knocked loudly. State Financial Crimes Division. Search warrant. No response. They knocked again. Still nothing. Finally, they entered. The house filled with voices and hurried footsteps. I remained outside with Malcolm until an investigator waved us toward the entrance. Inside, the scene was complete chaos. Kitchen drawers had been pulled open. Cabinets stood empty. A laptop rested on the dining table with its screen still glowing. Upstairs, officers shouted for additional evidence bags. I climbed the staircase slowly, supported by the handrail. When I reached the hallway, I saw exactly why they had called for more help. The bedroom door stood open. Kalen and a middle-aged man I had never seen before were standing beside an industrial paper shredder. Thousands of paper strips covered the carpet. The man tried to explain. We were cleaning old files. No one believed him. Another officer held up several external hard drives recovered from beneath the bed. A digital forensic technician smiled slightly. They didn't have time. Agent Corwin looked toward him. What did you find? The drives are intact. Within minutes, technicians confirmed they contained encrypted document templates, forged signatures, property transfer forms, scanned identification cards, financial ledgers, and communication records connected to numerous fraudulent transactions. Meanwhile, Leora sat downstairs at the kitchen table, visibly shaken. She repeatedly insisted she knew nothing about forged paperwork. When investigators showed her the emails discussing my surgery and the fake transfer, tears filled her eyes. She looked toward Kalen as officers escorted him downstairs in handcuffs. "You told me everything was legal," she whispered. He said nothing. For the first time since I had arrived home days earlier, his confidence disappeared completely. Outside, neighbors gathered quietly along the sidewalk. Several recognized me and offered sympathetic nods. News reporters soon arrived after monitoring police radio traffic. Cameras recorded officers carrying boxes of evidence from the house. As Kalen was placed into the back of a patrol vehicle, he finally looked at me. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even frightened. It was desperate. "Dad," he called out. I walked several steps closer. He lowered his voice. "You can still stop this." I looked at him carefully. "No," I answered. "You could have stopped this the day you decided to steal from your own family." He lowered his head without another word. As the patrol car drove away, Agent Corwin received a call from headquarters. She listened silently before ending the conversation. Then she turned toward Malcolm and me. "This investigation just expanded," she said. "We've identified 18 additional homeowners connected to the same fraud network, and every one of them may have been targeted using the exact same method." Nearly a year passed before everything finally came to an end. The investigation grew far beyond my family, reaching several counties and uncovering a sophisticated property fraud operation that had quietly stolen homes from vulnerable people for years. What began with my son's unbelievable words at the bedroom door eventually exposed one of the largest real estate forgery schemes our state had seen in decades. During those months, I spent more time inside courtrooms than I ever imagined possible. Every hearing revealed another piece of the truth. Digital forensic experts explained how official records had been manipulated. Financial analysts traced millions of dollars through shell companies that existed only on paper. Investigators introduced emails, encrypted messages, banking records, and electronic signatures that connected every participant to the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Ashcroft Estate Transition Services had recruited relatives, caregivers, and trusted acquaintances to gain temporary access to valuable properties. Once homeowners were away because of illness, travel, or rehabilitation, forged transfer documents were submitted electronically. Fake insurance policies replaced legitimate ones. Personal belongings disappeared. Family photographs were removed to create the appearance that the rightful owners had already moved away. Loans were then secured against the stolen properties before anyone realized what had happened. My home had nearly become just another successful case. Fortunately, it became the case that brought everything crashing down. Leora testified during the trial after accepting a cooperation agreement with prosecutors. She admitted that she had believed every document Kalen showed her. He convinced her that I had voluntarily retired to a smaller apartment and wanted the younger generation to enjoy the family home. She described how he insisted on removing every photograph of me because he wanted visitors to believe the house had always belonged to them. Listening to her testimony, I realized she had been manipulated almost as thoroughly as everyone else. Kalen chose to testify in his own defense. That decision proved disastrous. Under cross-examination, prosecutors confronted him with his own encrypted emails, financial transfers, deleted messages recovered from hard drives, and recorded conversations with the consulting firm's owner. Every attempt to explain the evidence only created more contradictions. By the end of his testimony, even members of the jury appeared exhausted by his excuses. After several days of deliberation, the verdict was announced. Guilty on every major count. Conspiracy, identity fraud, forgery, financial crimes, wire fraud, participation in an organized criminal enterprise. The judge described the scheme as a calculated betrayal of both families and public trust before imposing a lengthy prison sentence. Several other members of the operation also received substantial prison terms. The consulting firm's owner lost every remaining asset, declared bankruptcy, and was ordered to pay restitution to victims for the rest of his life. As for my property, the court immediately restored full legal ownership to me. Every fraudulent filing was removed from the county records, my insurance policy was reinstated, and every unauthorized loan connected to the forged transfer was permanently canceled. Walking back into my bedroom after the judgment became final felt completely different from the day I had returned from Montana. The walls had been repainted to their original color. My wife's quilt rested on the bed once again after investigators recovered it from a storage facility. Family photographs returned to the hallway exactly where they had always belonged. Even the old grandfather clock was found inside one of the consulting company's warehouses and carefully transported home. For the first time in months, the house felt like mine again. People often ask whether I ever visited Kalen after his conviction. The answer is no. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I eventually let go of my anger because carrying it every day only harmed me. But rebuilding trust requires honesty, and that was a choice only he could make for himself. Instead of dwelling on what I had lost, I focused on helping others avoid the same nightmare. Together with Noemi Halvers and attorney Malcolm Reeve, I began speaking at community centers, libraries, and senior organizations about protecting property records, recognizing fraud, and verifying legal documents before signing anything. We also encouraged families to discuss financial transparency before crises created opportunities for deception. If sharing my experience prevented even one person from becoming another victim, then something good had come from the worst chapter of my life. Looking back now, I realize the most painful moment was not when my son shouted, "That room is my wife's." The most painful realization was understanding that the theft had started long before I opened that bedroom door. It began the moment greed became more important than family. In the end, the house remained standing, the truth prevailed, and justice reached everyone responsible. My memories could never be forged, erased, or transferred by a fake signature. They were mine, and they always would be. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you enjoyed this emotional journey filled with shocking twists, satisfying justice, and unforgettable family drama, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story. I'd love to have you join me again for another incredible tale.